Ethan Cole had always been a man of quiet devotion to his craft, to his friendships, and above all, to Madison, the woman he believed was his future. That night, he left work earlier than usual, his arms full of roses and his mind rehearsing the way her eyes would light up when she saw him. The apartment door opened with the familiar creak, but instead of the warm, unsuspecting stillness of home, Ethan froze at the hushed laughter drifting from the living room. He stepped closer, each footfall sinking him deeper into unease, until the sight before him stole the breath from his chest. Madison sat on the couch, her hand resting too intimately on Ryan's arm, her head leaning close to his as if drawn by gravity. The look she gave Ryan wasn't casual, wasn't friendly, it was the look Ethan thought belonged only to him. 1,000 late nights, shared secrets, and whispered promises shattered in that instant, yet he stood rooted to the spot, unseen, as his heart broke silently. Instinct screamed at Ethan to storm in, demand answers, rage at the betrayal, but he didn't. Instead, something colder and sharper took over, control. With a forced smile and casual tone, he entered the room, roses hidden behind his back like a cruel joke. Madison startled slightly, her smile tightening, while Ryan shifted uncomfortably, though neither betrayed guilt outright. Ethan's chest tightened as he played his part, asking about their evening, feigning lightheartedness while every word tasted like ash. Inside, though, his world was collapsing, the foundation of trust he had built since childhood crumbling beneath him. Ryan wasn't just a friend, he was the brother Ethan never had, the boy who shared his first scraped knee, his biggest dreams. And Madison, she was supposed to be his safe harbor, the one person he believed saw him completely. Now, sitting across from them, Ethan was both actor and audience in a play he never agreed to, each glance between them another knife twisting deeper. This single moment defines the emotional battlefield that follows. Ethan's silence isn't weakness, it's the chilling calm before the storm, the choice to watch and absorb the magnitude of what has been stolen from him before deciding what comes next. His love for Madison is undeniable, painted in the way he remembers the life they were supposed to build. His loyalty to Ryan is undeniable too, forged through years of friendship and sacrifice. But their betrayal doesn't just wound him, it dismantles his entire sense of identity. Who is Ethan, if not the man loved by Madison and trusted by Ryan? That evening sets the tone for everything that follows, a story not just about betrayal, but about rediscovering self-worth, rebuilding from ruins, and finding out what happens when the people you trust most become the architects of your destruction. The audience is left with a searing question: when loyalty is repaid with treachery, what path does the heart choose? Vengeance, forgiveness, or freedom? Ethan Cole grew up learning the weight of promises through absence. His father left when he was barely old enough to understand betrayal, leaving Ethan's mother to carry the burden of two roles, protector and provider. From her, he inherited resilience and the belief that loyalty is the foundation of love. For Ethan, every friendship and relationship became a sacred vow, one never to be broken. This is why Ryan mattered so much. Their bond wasn't casual, it was forged in the fires of shared boyhood struggles. Ryan was the one who patched him up after playground fights, the one who sat beside him during nights when loneliness gnawed hardest. In many ways, Ryan was more family than any blood relative, a brother Ethan never had but always needed. And Madison, when she entered Ethan's life, felt like the final piece to a puzzle, the embodiment of stability he fought for, the proof that loyalty and devotion would finally be rewarded. To Ethan, these two people weren't just companions, they were his anchor points in a world that once felt like it could disappear at any moment. Which is why, when betrayal strikes, it's not just a wound to the heart, it's a dismantling of everything Ethan believed kept him safe. Madison grew up surrounded by comforts Ethan could only dream of: marble floors, trust funds, and a life where problems were smoothed over with wealth. But privilege never gave her clarity, instead, it made her restless. She had everything material but craved emotional grounding. With Ethan, she found safety. His devotion was unshakable, his dreams built on hard work rather than shortcuts, and for a time, that steadiness anchored her wandering spirit. Yet deep inside, Madison was always drawn to sparks of danger, the thrill of unpredictability, the allure of passion unbound by rules. Ryan embodied everything Ethan was not: reckless charm, quick laughter, and a dangerous streak that made her heart race in ways Ethan's steady love sometimes could not. Torn between the comfort of stability and the excitement of risk, Madison kept her conflict buried, convincing herself she wanted both. To Ethan, she played the role of devoted fiancé, smiling through wedding preparations and late-night planning sessions. To herself, though, she lived with a gnawing secret that part of her longed for Ryan's fire, even as she held Ethan's hand. Her duplicity was not just about infidelity, it was about her own fractured desires, a tug-of-war between the life she believed she should live and the reckless impulses she could never fully silence. The irony of Ethan's world was that the two people he trusted most were also the ones quietly undermining him. Ryan had always been the loyal friend, or so it seemed. He helped Ethan survive the cruelty of adolescence, defended him against bullies, and shared in his triumphs. But behind Ryan's grins and loyalty lingered envy, a shadow that grew darker as Ethan's career flourished and his engagement to Madison solidified. Ryan masked his resentment with brotherly affection, positioning himself as Ethan's greatest supporter. It was this guise of loyalty that made his betrayal all the more venomous. Presently, Ethan was finalizing the last touches on the home he and Madison would soon share, pouring his love into every detail of its renovation. Madison, overwhelmed with the chaos of wedding planning, leaned heavily on Ryan for comfort, or so she claimed. He was constantly present, offering to help with errands, distracting her stress with humor, playing the role of best man before the vows were even spoken. To Ethan, Ryan's presence was reassuring, proof of their unshakable bond. To Madison, it was temptation hiding in plain sight. The weeks leading up to the wedding seemed like the perfect picture, Ethan hammering nails into walls, Madison rehearsing vows, and Ryan always nearby. Yet beneath the surface, each smile, each laugh, each fleeting glance between Madison and Ryan was a silent betrayal waiting to detonate. The foundation Ethan built was already cracked, only he didn't see it yet. Ethan had always trusted his instincts, and lately, they whispered to him in uneasy tones he couldn't silence. Madison's distracted glances, Ryan's too frequent presence, the lingering silence after he entered a room, it was a chorus of suspicions Ethan tried desperately to ignore. But one night, unable to resist the gnawing in his chest, he picked up Madison's phone left on the kitchen counter, screen glowing with unread notifications. His hands trembled as he opened her messages, and there it was. Undeniable proof. Words of longing, secret plans, and intimate promises between Madison and Ryan filled the screen like poison. Phrases such as "I wish it were just us" and "you make me feel alive" weren't misinterpreted jokes or platonic slips, they were declarations of love. Each message was a dagger, confirming what Ethan had tried to bury in denial. The roses, the renovations, the wedding vows waiting to be spoken, they all shriveled under the weight of truth. For Ethan, the discovery was more than betrayal, it was confirmation that the life he had built was a fragile illusion, already shattered beyond repair. Ethan didn't storm in with fury. Instead, his confrontation with Madison was heartbreak cloaked in restraint. That evening, when the apartment felt too quiet, he sat across from her, the phone still in his hand. "Tell me it isn't true," he said softly, his voice breaking under the weight of desperation. Madison's eyes widened, tears welling almost instantly. She tried to reach for him, stammering half-formed excuses before collapsing into sobs. "I never meant for it to happen," she whispered. It just did. "I love you, Ethan, but I can't deny what I feel for Ryan." Her confession was both an admission and a wound, delivered with trembling lips that once promised forever. Ethan's chest constricted as he listened, part of him begging for her to take it back, to laugh and call it a misunderstanding. But her tears were not of regret for betrayal, but of being caught between two loves. "I love you both," she said, the words slicing deeper than any rage could. Ethan's silence in that moment wasn't forgiveness, it was the quiet implosion of everything he thought he knew. The days that followed felt like an unraveling of Ethan's very identity. The wedding invitations, once symbols of joy, became cruel reminders of a union that would never be. The house he had poured his sweat into, hammering nails with dreams of family, now stood as a hollow monument to a future stolen from him. Madison's betrayal was one wound, but Ryan's treachery was another altogether. The man Ethan had trusted like a brother, the one person who knew his fears, his history, his scars, had taken what was most sacred. It wasn't simply about losing Madison, it was about the collapse of trust, of loyalty, of the very values that defined Ethan's life. He couldn't look at himself in the mirror without feeling foolish, duped, unworthy, a man who had built his entire world on relationships that crumbled under temptation. In the wake of devastation, Ethan stood at a crossroads. He could let this betrayal break him completely, or he could let it ignite the painful journey of rebuilding. But in that moment, amidst the ashes of cancelled vows and broken brotherhood, Ethan knew only one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. This was no longer about love lost, it was about finding out who he was when everything familiar was stripped away. The confrontation with Ryan was the final twist of the knife. Ethan approached him not as an enemy but as a brother seeking answers, hoping for some glimmer of remorse. But Ryan's response was a devastating revelation. He didn't deny the affair, didn't shrink under the weight of guilt. Instead, he smirked with a smugness Ethan had never seen before. "Madison deserves a man who excites her," Ryan said, his words cold and deliberate, meant to cut. "You're too safe, too predictable. She needs more than that." Ethan felt his breath leave him, not in anger but in shock at how casually Ryan dismissed years of friendship. This wasn't just betrayal, it was betrayal cloaked in contempt, stripping Ethan of dignity. The man he trusted most had not only taken what was his but justified it as though Ethan had somehow deserved the loss. Their bond, once unbreakable, dissolved in that instant into bitter ash. Ethan left the confrontation with trembling hands, his heart not just broken but hollowed out, as if Ryan had stolen the very definition of brotherhood from him. The fallout didn't remain private for long. Whispers spread quickly, co-workers noticed Ethan's absent stare during meetings, friends gossiped about the cancelled wedding, and family members called with hushed sympathy. Some pitied him, offering words that stung more than they soothed. Others, manipulated by Madison's carefully crafted narrative, began to question Ethan himself. Madison painted him as too safe, a man who couldn't keep her passion alive, subtly shifting blame to his steadiness. To the outside world, Ethan appeared as the unlucky groom left behind, but beneath the surface, the whispers carried cruel undertones. Perhaps he hadn't been enough. Invitations were rescinded, plans cancelled, and the once celebratory season turned into a spectacle of shame. Every sympathetic look felt like a spotlight on his failure. He avoided gatherings, sidestepped questions, and buried himself in silence, unable to defend himself against stories spun without his consent. The world Ethan had built, professional respect, social stability, personal loyalty, was now fractured, every corner echoing with judgment and pity he never asked for. In the weeks that followed, Ethan spiraled into a darkness he couldn't escape. Nights blurred into endless cycles of insomnia, his mind replaying every moment he shared with Madison and Ryan, dissecting each laugh, each lingering glance he had missed. Depression settled over him like a suffocating fog, convincing him he was unworthy, unlovable, inadequate. He questioned every choice he had made, wondering if his loyalty had been weakness, if his devotion had been naivety. Friends' calls went unanswered, family visits ignored, isolation became his only refuge. But amid the silence, a small light flickered. Claire, a colleague at the firm, noticed his decline and refused to let him disappear completely. She offered him not pity, but purpose, encouraging him to channel his pain into an ambitious architectural project the firm had long delayed. At first, Ethan resisted, his spirit too fractured to imagine creating anything meaningful. Yet slowly, sketch by sketch, blueprint by blueprint, he began to pour his brokenness into design. Each line was both an escape and a reclamation, a reminder that while love and loyalty had betrayed him, his craft remained untouched, untainted. In the ruins of betrayal, seeds of strength began to take root, fragile, but alive. Months had passed since Ethan's world crumbled, but the wound still pulsed beneath the surface. When the embossed envelope arrived, an invitation to Madison and Ryan's engagement party, it felt like a cruel joke. Friends and family urged him to toss it away, to let go, to avoid reopening the wound. But Ethan's silence had always been mistaken for weakness, and this time, he refused to stay invisible. On the night of the event, he walked into the lavishly decorated hall dressed in understated elegance, his face calm, his movements steady. Every pair of eyes followed him, whispers trailing like shadows. Ryan looked smug, Madison radiant, their smiles designed to flaunt victory. Ethan said little, choosing instead to observe, to let the weight of his presence alone disturb the celebration. The irony was sharp. Months ago, this would have been his night, his vows, his love story on display. Now, he was the ghost haunting their triumph, carrying with him a truth they had no idea was coming. The evening unfolded with speeches, laughter, and clinking glasses. When Madison finally took the microphone, her voice trembled with rehearsed emotion. She looked at Ryan with adoration, declaring him her true love, the man who made her feel alive after years of settling for safety. The room erupted in applause, but Ethan remained still, his expression unreadable. Then, with a calmness that silenced even the most eager chatter, Ethan stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice, he simply produced his phone and displayed a series of photographs and messages, Ryan in the arms of another woman, promises of love and late-night rendezvous that mirrored the ones Ethan had once discovered. Gasps cut through the air, and Madison's face drained of color. The woman who had sacrificed everything for Ryan stood exposed, realizing she had destroyed her life for a man who treated her no differently than she had treated Ethan. The hall, moments ago filled with celebration, now trembled with betrayal, humiliation, and chaos. The crowd shifted into a frenzy of whispers, accusations, and stunned silence. Madison's tears fell freely, Ryan's arrogance faltered, but Ethan remained steady, not triumphant, not cruel, but liberated. He looked at them both with a quiet finality and spoke words that carried more weight than any outburst ever could. "I gave you both everything," he said, his voice calm and resonant. "You gave me nothing. But tonight, I'm free." There was no malice in his tone, only truth. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving the shattered remnants of their illusions behind. The room descended into chaos, guests taking sides, Madison demanding explanations, Ryan scrambling to defend himself. Yet Ethan didn't look back. His departure wasn't just an exit from the party, it was the closing of a chapter, the reclaiming of his life. For the first time in months, he wasn't the broken man abandoned at the altar of betrayal, he was the man who chose freedom over chains, dignity over despair. The chaos he left behind was theirs to bear, not his. Ethan stepped into the night not as a victim, but as someone finally untethered, ready to rebuild on his own terms. In the months after the explosive confrontation, Ethan redirected his energy into the one thing that had never betrayed him, his work. The architectural project Claire had nudged him toward became more than just blueprints and steel, it became his lifeline. Every late night at the drafting table, every line drawn, every concept refined was infused with the weight of his pain and the determination to create something lasting. What began as a distraction grew into his masterpiece, a project that not only impressed his firm but also won accolades within the industry. Yet success wasn't what healed him, it was the process. For the first time since the betrayal, Ethan felt the stirring of pride not tied to anyone else's validation. Claire remained nearby throughout, never pushing, never asking for more than he could give. She respected his silences, celebrated his small victories, and reminded him, without words, that companionship could exist without manipulation or betrayal. Their connection wasn't about romance or rebound, but about presence, about proving that genuine kindness still existed. Ethan wasn't rushing into love again, but he was learning to trust the possibility of it, at his own pace. Ethan's healing wasn't limited to his career, it reached into the roots of his personal life. 4 years, he had carried the scars of his father's abandonment, quietly equating loyalty with survival. Betrayal from Madison and Ryan had reopened that childhood wound, convincing him for a time that he was unworthy of being chosen, of being loved without condition. But with space and reflection, Ethan began to see differently. He reconnected with his mother, sharing stories he had long buried, and in her quiet strength, he found a mirror of his own resilience. She reminded him that love wasn't about clinging to those who might leave, but about honoring himself enough to let go when others failed him. Slowly, Ethan began to value his own worth apart from external validation. He no longer defined himself as the man Madison had left behind or the friend Ryan had betrayed. Instead, he embraced himself as a survivor, someone who had walked through fire and refused to stay burned. In therapy sessions, late-night journaling, and honest conversations with his mother, he rebuilt trust not in others, but in himself. The final act of closure came quietly, without ceremony. One afternoon, Ethan opened the drawer where Madison's engagement ring still lay, untouched since the day of discovery. 4 months, it had been both a relic and a chain, a reminder of promises broken and the weight of betrayal. Holding it in his palm, Ethan no longer felt anger. Instead, he felt release. He decided to donate it to a charity that helped fund marriages for couples who couldn't afford rings. What once symbolized his own heartbreak could now bring joy to someone else, a transformation of pain into hope. As he handed it over, Ethan felt a weight lift, as though the final tether to Madison and Ryan had been severed. Walking away, he didn't carry bitterness, he carried freedom. The ring's absence didn't signify loss anymore, but space for new beginnings, for healing, for self-love, and perhaps one day, love that would honor him in return. Ethan's journey wasn't about revenge or erasing the past, it was about reclaiming his narrative. Betrayal had once defined him, but now, empowerment did. He no longer looked back with resentment, but forward with quiet confidence, ready to build not just structures of steel and glass, but a life rooted in strength, dignity, and choice. The city stretched endlessly outside Ethan's window, lights flickering like scattered stars against the dark sky. His new apartment was modest, a far cry from the house he had once renovated for a life that never came to be, but it was a place untouched by ghosts of betrayal. The silence inside wasn't suffocating anymore, it was peaceful, even comforting. At his desk, with only a lamp casting a warm glow, Ethan opened his journal. The pages were filled with months of raw confessions, sketches of buildings, fragments of memories he had fought to untangle. Tonight, though, his words were clear. The ones I trusted most broke me. But I rebuilt. Stronger. Wiser. Free. The act of writing wasn't for closure or catharsis anymore, it was for acknowledgement. This was the truth of his journey, not that betrayal defined him, but that healing had remade him. As he set the pen down, he exhaled deeply, feeling lighter than he had in years. The skyline reflected back to him not the pain of the past, but the vastness of possibility ahead. A gentle knock interrupted the quiet, pulling Ethan from his reflection. When he opened the door, there stood Claire, holding 2 paper bags of takeout, her smile soft but steady. She didn't need to ask how he was doing, nor did she attempt to fill the space with words. Her presence alone spoke enough that life, though scarred, continued, and companionship didn't have to come with conditions or betrayal. Ethan stepped aside, letting her in, the simple act carrying weight beyond measure. For months, Claire had been a quiet constant, offering encouragement when he faltered and space when he needed it. Now, sharing takeout containers at his small dining table, the two of them laughed lightly about the chaos of their day. It wasn't romance, not yet, perhaps not ever, but it was something more precious: trust. For the first time, Ethan realized he didn't need dramatic declarations or sweeping gestures to feel whole.